Hello and welcome to Line Changing Radio's Weekend Magazine, the program that examines the people, places, and events that impact New England. I'm Matthew Fake. A New Hampshire school district can continue to encourage officials to not inform parents of their child's transgender status. This policy remains in effect following the state's recent Supreme Court affirmation of a previous lower court ruling in favor of the school district. Sherry Few is the founder and president of U.S. Parents Involved in Education and shares her thoughts on the ruling with Line Changing Radio's Randy Berkson after explaining why her organization was established.
So when we started out as South Carolina Parents Involved in Education, the state where I live in South Carolina, we had some egregious sex education standards coming down from our State Department of Education, and several parents came together and objected and went to the state board and were successful in having the standards changed to more of a abstinence until marriage approach. So that's how we started as South Carolina Parents Involved in Education. And later on, we led the fight against the Common Core standards in 2010. And after suffering a blow from all of our hard work against the Common Core standards, I collaborated with other leaders in other states around the country who had a similar experience, spending a couple of years fighting Common Core, only to have their state legislature rebranded and put it back out under a different name.
What is Common Core, if I could interrupt for a second?
Sure. So Common Core was was a group of national standards that were pushed on states by the federal government. So they had what they called Race to the Top grant program, where states were competing for a large amount of funding. And as if they had adopted the Common Core standards by the time they turned in their grant application, they would get extra points. So that's how they incentivize states to adopt these national standards before they were even finished. They were very faulty standards. They're still in place all over the country except in Florida. It's just really dumbed down education. The goal was to lower the higher achieving students down so that everybody has the same level of achievement. So it was a struggle, and it still is today. They talk about the poor academic achievement scores when compared to other countries, but actually, and they like to blame it on COVID, but actually it started back with the Common Core standards when we started losing proficiency in reading, writing, and math.
It's kind of like homogenized milk, I guess. Maybe one way to put it. Maybe we should cut to the chase just in the interest of time that we have. It is limited.
Sure.
The state Supreme Court upholds a policy that allows staff to hide kids' transgender status from parents. Your initial reaction?
Well, I'm outraged. I'm seriously outraged at how the education system, for one, seems to think that they know better than parents. And we've seen indications of this for some time in policies that have been enacted across the country. Their parents are, information is being withheld from parents when students decide that they want to be a gender opposite their biological sex. And it's appalling that parents are thought to have little say in these matters. And somehow or another, to justify these policies, education systems are saying that students have the right to be safe, quote unquote, safe, to choose their gender and what identity they want to have. So it's suggesting that somehow children are unsafe from their parents. And it's really an outrage. It's over the top. I pray that they will take it to the Supreme Court where it will be overturned, because we have got to end this idea of putting a wedge between parents and their children. Parents are villainized by this type of policy, suggesting that children would not be safe if they were be honest with their parents about things that they're feeling. So it's really one of the most discouraging court decisions I have seen in my lifetime.
Are you working with people in New Hampshire?
We have people all over the country that we work with. I don't think we have a state chapter in New Hampshire. We have state chapters in 20 of the states in our country, but I don't think we have a chapter there. But we have people that sign up and are active, involved in gaining information and resources from our organization from all over the country.
What does transgender status really mean, in your opinion?
Well, first of all, when we were fighting, some of us were fighting against gay marriage, we understood that it wasn't just about rights, about having the right to have your significant other in the hospital with you and all the types of arguments we heard. We knew that it would just be the crack in the dam that would open the door to all these other things. So we've heard the acronym LGBTQ for a long time, but we never really paid much attention to the T because, initially there were just cross-dressers and drag queens, and we thought it was just a peculiar thing that some people had a fetish for dressing up like the opposite sex. And then all of a sudden it's just exploded. And seriously, grooming young children into thinking that it's a possibility for them that they could have any sort of identity. And there's a gender spectrum that lists like 54 different identities. And they're teaching this gender spectrum to very young children, even beginning in kindergarten. So it's planted in children's minds that this is a possibility for them. And that's where the sickness begins. And so it has really become, it's permeated our culture. We hear and see on television, lots of characters. Even in our government, I think our Secretary of Health is a transgender, a male that's changed his identity to a woman. So, it's it was what we thought would happen is exactly what we're seeing happen in the culture today with this whole movement. And the end game is really sick because where it's headed, the trajectory for this movement is to allow, there's an acronym called MAP, and it stands for Minor Attracted Persons. So these people that think anything goes as far as sexuality would ultimately like it to be legal and open for adults to have sex with children, pedophiles, pedophilia. I mean, if you look up the term MAP, minor attracted person, you would be shocked at how many things come up on the internet, all these different organizations that are supportive of this sick pedophilia behavior.
A reminder, we're listening to a discussion on the New Hampshire Supreme Court ruling upholding a policy that allows staff to hide kids' transgender status from their parents. As Sherry Few is speaking here with Light Changing Radio's Randy Berkson.
Why and where, if you could tell us, I don't know if you have any numbers, where are the schools that are doing this? Or where are they most likely to pop up? And what kind of an environment, geographically speaking?
Well, I hate to say this, but I believe it's all over the country in every school system. When we've been studying critical race theory, and a lot of people thought, well, that's happening in, Oregon or California or places like that. But in the state where I live, the red state where I live, I've researched 12 different school districts, and every single one of them has critical race theory. So these kinds of things have seeped into K-12, and I believe it's all over the country. I don't believe it's just in particular states, although we have seen some of the more left-leaning states really paving the road for this and enacting laws that protect schools. Actually, in California, Gavin Newsom signed a bill just a couple of months ago prohibiting schools from telling parents if their child was transitioning. So not like in this state, in New Hampshire, where they're just encouraging not to tell parents, but it's actually prohibited by law for schools to inform parents if their child is transitioning. So it's really all over the country, but it is more aggressive in certain states, in California, New Hampshire, Minnesota, where the Kamala Harris is VP, is governor. It is another state that's really aggressive. He signed a law that will allow children from other states where it's prohibited in their state for them to have transition surgery to come to New Hampshire, and sort of has made New Hampshire what they call it. So children can go there.
What do they call it? I lost you there.
Trans refuge.
What is trans refuge?
So that's what they're calling the state of Minnesota, where Tim Walz is governor, because he signed a law. He signed a bill into law saying that children from other states where it's prohibited by law for them to have transitions, they can come to Minnesota and not face any kind of retribution legally. It's a safe haven for them to come to Minnesota to have transition surgery. And if there's a custody battle going on, the state of Minnesota will even take temporary custody of the child so that they can have their surgery while the parents battle out what's right and wrong for the child.
You know, it makes you wonder, is this really happening? So how many are doing this? What kind of people, and where are they, and who would even bother with this?
So this parent in New Hampshire that we're talking about that sued, and the court decided in favor of the schools, you know, this was 2 years ago. And if I were her, and if I were any parent of school-age children today, my kids have you know, they have children of their own, and my grandchildren, thank God, are being homeschooled. But I would not leave my child in a system like this. I mean, parents have to recognize, they have to wake up and recognize the fact that their children are being harmed in government schools. This nonsense is happening from kindergarten on up. If you remember Governor DeSantis, when he was running for president, there was a law that they enacted that said you couldn't teach this in kindergarten through third grade. So he supported a law and signed a bill into law protecting children in kindergarten from third grade from being taught this. And that just seems like common sense, that you would protect children from this kind of thing at young ages. But he was attacked viciously, and it was termed the Don't Say Gay bill. So this, again, this is happening all over the country. It's seeped in. It's been, you know, highly thought of in colleges and universities for decades, but all of that now is in K-12. And they're trying to hide it. They've been hiding it probably for some time. But, you know, the biggest problem, besides the harm and damage it's doing to children, obviously that's big enough, but they're pitting parents against their children. They're driving a wedge between children and their parents. And, you know, I'm very concerned about our country's future, because I believe it's an intentional agenda, this idea of pitting parents against their children. And we've seen it happen in other countries. It happened under the Mao regime, and it happened with Hitler. They knew that if they could pump the brains of children full of propaganda, pit them against each other, and hate their country, and divide them from their parents, then they could be successful in convincing people for the regime change that they had in mind. And that's where we're headed in this country too, if we don't stop the indoctrination of children in government schools.
All right, I'm going to just ask you two final questions before we wrap up. Some see this as merely a fad that will eventually run its course and eventually fade away. What about you? What do you think?
Not at all. Not at all. It is totally evil. It is from the pit of hell, and they will not give up until they achieve their agenda.
All right, and finally, what options do you see for parents who have a problem with schools' transgender policies?
Well, first of all, their first line of defense is to protect their children. If they have children in government schools, they need to get their children out. If they don't understand how bad it is, they can watch the documentary film that we produced called Truth and Lies in American Education, and they can find that at our website, which is USPIE, that's USPI.org. So first of all, get your children out. They are harming your children. It'll be permanent damage. You have to get them out, and no excuses. You have to find a way. You have to make sacrifices and protect your child. But then we don't leave all the other children behind. they're educating the masses. And again, the agenda is to destroy our current form of government and replace it with a communist and Marxist regime. So even if you don't have children in government schools, you need to be aware of what's happening, get in the fight, help us to stop this. Our very tax dollars are funding this agenda. And if we're going to protect the freedom in this country, we've all got to work together to stop the propaganda and the indoctrination of children in government schools.
All right, we want to stay in touch with you down the line to see how this progresses. Sherry Few, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate the time.
All right. Thank you, Randy.